Free agent targets for the New York Rangers. We know the Blue Shirts have limited cap space going into free agency this offseason, and that's why we're identifying three different unrestricted free agents who should be inexpensive, and we're going to talk about them and why the Rangers should or could or maybe even will look to target them this season once free agency begins. All this and much, much more on today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers.
You're Locked On the New York Rangers, your daily podcast on the New York Rangers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, Blue Shirts fans, to episode number 853 of the Locked On New York Rangers podcast. I'm your host, John Chick. Just want to thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. And we are, of course, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And so, yeah, I mean, pretty much the intro says it all. We're going to take a look at three different unrestricted free agents from around this league that I think the Rangers have maybe at least a little bit of a chance to sign, or they're at least people on whom the Rangers should do their due diligence. They could be fits and, guys that overall I like. I like all three of the players that we're going to talk about on today's episode. And go ahead and just dive right into it here, beginning with Garnet Hathaway, 31-year-old winger who played for the Capitals as well as the Bruins this past season. Big guy, 6'3", 208 pounds. This is the kind of hardworking, blue-collar, old-school, tough player that the Rangers really could use more of. We need a few more guys who, I always used to say this about Jesper Fast. They play every shift like it's their last. Guys that just go out there and grind, and they get after it. They play physical. They're not going to be pushed around. I think Garnet Hathaway definitely fits the bill there. And something that we got to talk about right away as it pertains to Hathaway, first and foremost, he plays right wing, and that is absolutely where the Rangers, at least in my very humble opinion, are at their weakest. Beyond Capo Caco, there aren't really any sure things. And even Caco, I don't know that you can really call him a sure thing, but obviously they drafted him very high. There's upside. He has gotten better with every year that he's been in the league. But the Rangers do need a little bit more at right wing. Hathaway can also play some left wing, although I got to believe if the Rangers were to bring him in, they would certainly see him as a right winger. Good to know he can play the left side in a pinch. But, Hathaway, as one of the bottom six right wings on this team, whether it's the third line or preferably the fourth line, I think he could certainly be a fit there to kind of just run through his stats and what he's done thus far in his NHL career. 457 games with the Flames, Capitals, and Bruins, has scored 58 goals and picked up 64 assists. So 122 points in 457 games, scoring, obviously not really his MO. He can chip in there every once in a while. He's a plus 53 for his career. His worst season ever, as far as plus minus is concerned, was only a -1, and that occurred when he was a rookie. He's also averaged 11 minutes and 35 seconds of ice time per night, 1,346 hits in his career, so that's close to averaging 3 hits per game, and that's especially impressive when you consider that, once again, he doesn't get a ton of ice time for his career. Once again, 11 minutes and 35 seconds of ice time per night. So when he's out there, he's playing a physical brand of hockey. He's looking to hit anything that moves. And again, I do think the Rangers, and I think a lot of you guys will probably back me up on this, could use more players of that ilk. He has also blocked 320 shots in his career, 118 takeaways against 111 giveaways, and then another 31 playoff games for Hathaway, 3 goals and 3 assists in those postseason games. This past season, he split it between the Capitals and the Bruins, 84 games, which is interesting in its own right because teams only play 82, but of course he was traded, ends up playing more than 82 games, gets 84 games, 13 goals for Hathaway, 9 assists, 22 points, a +5, average 11 minutes and 48 seconds of ice time between the two teams, 268 hits. That was a new career high, as was his total of block shots, which was 83, also a new career high. And I think that the fact that the Boston Bruins of all teams, they're having this unbelievably impressive regular season. And we all know what happened in the first round. They get knocked out by the Panthers. But they're having a record-setting season and one of the best seasons that we've ever seen. And it's getting near the trade deadline. Okay, what do we have to do here? What kind of player are we looking for? How do we make this team that's been a juggernaut even better? How do we make this team even more of a threat come Stanley Cup playoff time? Well, one of the guys that they went out and got, among some others, was Garnet Hathaway. And to me, that kind of speaks volumes again, that a team like the Bruins that has been successful over the years, not quite as successful as their fans would lead you to believe. I believe it's like one Stanley Cup in 50 years, something along those lines. But they have been a good team. They're basically a threat every single season. And they were in first place in the league in the regular season by miles. And again, how do we make this team better? We go out and we acquire Hathaway to come in and play a physical brand of hockey for this team, and that's what they ended up doing. For me, Hathaway is somebody, it's going to be hard to figure out his market. If there's a team that wants more toughness and wants more grit badly enough, do they overpay? I think it's at least possible. But I don't think that Hathaway is going to command any more than, say, about $2 million annually. And even that might be a little bit too much for the Rangers. We'll see. Depends on some other things that happen. But as far as the contract that he just had, Hathaway coming off a 4-year deal that carried an average annual cap hit of just $1.5 million. So I think he probably gets a raise from that number, but probably not like a significant one. I can't imagine, maybe like $2 million, $2.25 million, somewhere in there. I think Hathaway, among other players, stands to benefit from the fact that there's a little bit of a thinner draft class than we've seen in some recent seasons. And so maybe some role players, guys like Hathaway, they end up getting longer deals, more expensive deals than they might otherwise get in some other off seasons where there are some, star players available. There just aren't as many of those kinds of players this time around. And Hathaway may stand to benefit from that. As Ranger fans, if we want Hathaway, we hope that doesn't happen, because if somebody really reaches for him, then the Rangers aren't going to be able to chase him. They just don't have the cap space to do it. One other thing that I have to mention about Hathaway, though, and it's something that, you guys have probably put the pieces together, and something that I'm sure a lot of you are already very well aware of, but there's familiarity with Peter Laviolette. He played for him in all 3 of the past 3 seasons with the Washington Capitals, and just kind of seems like a Laviolette kind of player. Plays a little bit of an edge. He really racks up the hits. And an interesting note is that Hathaway got more ice time under Laviolette than he had at any point in his career. Hathaway spent his first 4 seasons with the Flames, averaged 10 minutes and 47 seconds of ice time. And then in 4 seasons with the Capitals, he averaged 11 ice time per night. 3 of his 4 seasons were with Laviolette, the last 3 of the 4. And, again, obviously saw a great uptick in his ice time then. Then he goes to Boston. His ice time goes down to 11:04, which is to be expected. They had a great team, and he probably didn't have as big of a role with them as he did with the Caps. But it's also interesting to note, again, Hathaway not known as a great offensive player, but he did have his best offensive seasons under Peter Laviolette, a career high 14 goals in 2021, 2022, a career high 26 points that same season. And in the 2 full seasons with Laviolette, he had 12 assists in both of them, which is also his career high. He's never had more than 12 assists, and he did that twice with Peter Laviolette. So he was close to a third of a point per game player while he was playing with Peter Laviolette. Those are not Hall of Fame numbers. It's not going to jump off the page, but it shows that in addition to being, a physical, tough player to play against, he can help out offensively every once in a while too, especially when you once again consider his limited ice time. So to kind of wrap it up as far as Hathaway and how he could fit in with the Rangers, again, it's really tough to figure out his market. I don't think he would get a ton of money, but as we talked about, this is not the deepest or frankly most star-laden free agent class that we've ever seen, and that could result once again in players, role players like Garnet Hathaway getting bigger deals than you might expect them to get. If you're a Ranger fan and you want Hathaway on this team, as I do, then you're probably gonna have to just keep your fingers crossed that his price doesn't balloon. He doesn't get some crazy massive contract from some other team, because as I mentioned, if that is the case, I don't believe the Rangers would be able to chase him and really reach for him if he's somebody that they really want. And again, I think he'd be a great fit for this team, but it can only happen if the price is right. So we'll keep our eye on that. We'll see if there's any whispers about who Hathaway might end up with, but I really like him for the Rangers rounding out the bottom 6. Going to keep everything rolling in just a second here. We got a couple other free agents to get to, but first, we do have to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by eBay Motors. For a championship team, it is all about making sure every player is the perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure every part you need fits just right the first time around. Just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check to know the part will fit or your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop on eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you will be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay guaranteed fit, only available to U.S. customers, eligible items only, and exclusions apply. All right, we just want to go ahead and thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are, of course, free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. And for the everydayers, definitely stick around. We're going to continue to talk about pretty much every aspect of off-season Ranger hockey here. There's always a lot going on. We've got the draft and free agency right around the corner. We're going to continue to talk about those things. Going to talk about Peter Laviolette and who might fill out his coaching staff as assistant coach. And I believe in our next episode, we're going to do a crossover with Locked On Capitals. I want to go ahead and talk to some of the other Locked On hosts who cover teams that were coached by Peter Laviolette in the past. And, going with Locked On Caps here, his most recent stop with the Washington Capitals, figured that was a good place to start. But to keep everything rolling for today, move on to target number 2 out of 3 that we're going to discuss on today's episode in terms of unrestricted free agent targets or potential unrestricted free agent targets for the New York Rangers. We're going to move on to Noel Acciari, 31-year-old center and right winger. And for me, at least, those are the two positions where the Rangers have the most question marks. I mean, center's starting to fill out pretty nicely. Obviously, Filipino now under long-term contract. And you've also got Mika Zibanejad and Vincent Trocheck already in place. That's a solid trio there. Right wing for sure, though, I think is the biggest weakness. And those are the two positions that Acciari plays. Acciari stands 5'10", 210 pounds in his career, 384 games with the Bruins, Panthers, Blues, and Leafs. He has played for 3 different teams over the past 2 seasons, that being the final 3 of those teams, the Panthers, the Blues, and the Leafs. And in his career in 384 games, 59 goals, 41 assists, 100 points. He's a -10. He also averages 13 minutes and 36 seconds of ice time per night. He has racked up 1,009 hits, 156 takeaways against 81 giveaways, wins 50.1% of his faceoffs, and that's not exactly a small sample size either. So slightly over half. He's also blocked 349 shots in his career. This most recent season between the Blues and Leafs, a career high 77 games for Acciari, 14 goals. That was the second most of his career. A career high 9 assists, 23 points. That was also the second most of his career. He was a -4. He averaged 14 minutes and 19 seconds of ice time. Won a career high 53.8% of the faceoffs. And faceoffs in general seems like an area where he's gotten better and better as the seasons have gone by here. He also had a career high 244 hits, 81 block shots. That was the second most of his career. So a lot of career highs or second most of his career pretty much across the board there. But I like Acciari a lot. To me, he's somebody who shouldn't be super expensive, but he does, for somebody who would probably play in the bottom 6, he really does give you a little bit of everything. You get a little bit of secondary scoring from Acciari. I watched one of his goal reels on YouTube. These pop up all over YouTube. Some of them are produced by, NHL or, some other company. And, they'll basically just show, somebody scores 30 goals on a season. They'll show all 30 goals one right after another. Some of them are put up there by fans as well. But with Acciari, I was watching one of these goal reels of his. And the one thing that stood out to me more than anything else is a lot of his goals are of the dirty variety. He'll go to the net. He'll kind of figure out a way to get to the net undetected sometimes and kind of be wide open for a pass right there on the doorstep. It's kind of interesting how he does that. There's times where he'll score on a deflection every so often, scores on a lot of rebounds, or so it would seem, watching this highlight reel. But somebody that, again, is going to get some of those dirty goals, not the flashiest player or anything like that. But that leads me into the next thing that I want to talk about, and that is with Acciari. You're not going to get offensive fireworks. You're looking for hard-nosed hockey, and you will get that from Acciari. For starters, Acciari is somebody that was undrafted, and that alone is going to make you pretty much work your tail off if you're ever going to be a player in the NHL. I mean, there aren't too many undrafted players, and I'm realizing as I'm saying this, there's one on the Rangers that's going to fit this description, but there aren't too many, undrafted players in the league that aren't known for, tremendously hard work. There aren't too many of them that are going to light up the stat sheet night in and night out and make it to the NHL that way. Of course, with Artemi Panarin, he did do exactly that. He's obviously a scorer, but most of these guys that go undrafted and end up having, prosperous long careers in the NHL, and that's not to say that there are a ton of them, but they do exist. A lot of them, it's just from hard work. It's just from going out there and grinding, doing all the little things right, playing mistake-free hockey. And I think Acciari pretty much gives you all of those things. As far as the contract is concerned, Acciari is coming off of a one-year deal that only paid him $1.25 million. He signed that deal with the St. Louis Blues before this past season. He was then traded to the Toronto Maple Leafs near the deadline. Obviously, the Blues were sellers this season. His price tag, though, on this one-year deal, again, only $1.25 million. It was actually quite the downgrade from his most recent contract before that. The contract that he had before that was for 3 years with the Florida Panthers, had an average annual value of $1.66 million. So obviously shorter term, shorter or less money per year as well for Noel Acciari. And I get the feeling that maybe his next contract looks somewhat similar to his second most recent contract, the one that I just talked about that he signed with the Panthers. 3 years, $1.66 million. That's what he got from the Panthers. I could see like 3 years at 1.75, 1.8, maybe $2 million. I mean, we'll see. But somewhere in that ballpark, I think sounds about right for Acciari. He could be affordable for the Rangers, and it's also possible that they see him as maybe a less expensive and maybe not quite as good version of Barclay Goodrow. Goodrow, like I said, the Rangers need more players like Barclay Goodrow rather than fewer, but with his price tag and the role that he plays on the Rangers, and I like Goodrow. I really hope there's a way he can stick around, but facts are facts with the salary cap. He might be somebody that's a cap casualty and ends up being traded as a result of that. And then maybe you look to somebody like Noel Acciari who can come in, play a similar role, has a similar skill set, and cost you quite a bit less. That's at least possible. I also mentioned a minute ago the flexibility for Acciari. He can play both right wing and center, and obviously that's beneficial for the Rangers because, again, I do think those are the two positions where they are at their weakest. But, again, whether the Rangers make a play for Acciari or not, it also depends on, how many of their own guys are going to be back. I just mentioned Barclay Goodrow and the possibility of him being traded. Is Tyler Mott going to re-sign? I would love to have Tyler Mott back. If you ask me straight up, I can have one of Tyler Mott or anybody that we're going to talk about in today's episode. I'm going with Tyler Mott. I like the skill set. And I like what he brings to the Rangers. But if Tyler Mott moves on, then do you go at Noel Acciari? Does he become kind of a plan B there? Do Kane and Tarasenko re-sign? Obviously, if one of them is back, which seems unlikely, but if one of them is back, that's going to eat up a big chunk of the cap as well. And then you probably can't afford somebody like Acciari, even if he's only making like 1.8 or $2 million. If you bring back one of the superstars that the Rangers traded for, then you probably can't afford Acciari. But it's going to be interesting to see. Again, very hardworking, physical player, and I think the Rangers could use more of that. One of these guys. And I use this to describe, I use it to describe Garnet Hathaway just a couple of minutes ago. And also Jesper Fast when he's here. You need a couple of those grinders that just go out there, play every shift like it's their last. I think Acciari fits the bill there. And he might come a little bit cheaper than Garnet Hathaway as well. To me, these are two players, fairly similar skill sets, but they're two guys that I think the Rangers absolutely should look into and, do their due diligence, as they say, at least look into the possibility of bringing them into this team. And hopefully those players, whichever one it is, can provide the Rangers a little bit of what they lack, and obviously a really strong blue-collar work ethic as well. We're going to keep everything rolling. In just a second here, we got one other UFA that I want to talk about. He used to play for the Rangers. That's the hint. And, it's one of those things, I'm going to admit it's a little bit out there, but I need you guys to stick with me, through the explanation here. I think it'll make a little bit more sense once I'm done talking about the player that I'm going to talk about in just a second here. Okay, so the big mystery. Who's the third UFA that we're going to talk about in today's episode? I'm going to go, the only hint that I gave was that he used to play for the Rangers. And obviously, look, you can read the episode description and it'll be in there. And some of you might have already done that. You might know who I'm talking about. I'm going to go with Carl Hagelin. Anybody who listens to this show regularly, you guys know that I'm a fan of, obviously it has to make sense, but I'm a fan of Ranger reunions with former players. We saw that this past offseason with Jimmy Vesey. Vesey started his career with the Rangers, bounced around the league, came back to the Rangers, and played some of the best hockey that he's played in quite some time. Obviously not a superstar player, but somebody who understands his role and I think plays it very effectively. And, just this offseason, Jesper Foss, another one that he's a UFA. Maybe it makes some sense. Maybe there could be a fit between him and the Rangers. But again, I'm going to toss out Carl Hagelin here. And I realize there are some very, very obvious red flags here when it comes to potentially bringing back Carl Hagelin. I mean, I don't even know where to start. There's quite a few. But I'm going to explain again in due time here why I like this idea and why I think the Rangers should at least look into it. The first issue with Hagelin is the fact that he is starting to get older. He'll be 35 in August. So not ancient, but old enough where you can easily see his speed starting to decline a little bit. Once he's getting to that age, that used to be his trademark, just an absolute burner out there. And I think the Rangers could use more of that. I'm not so sure he can still bring that to the table the way that he used to. And that's especially true when you've had 2 surgeries on your hip. The most recent one was, I believe, this past February. Yeah, it was February. He missed all of this past season as a member of the Washington Capitals. And he also suffered an eye injury, a really serious eye injury in practice back in March of 2022. He actually, Hagelin, revealed just a couple of months ago here that he almost lost the eye. Like it almost didn't come through. He claimed also, though, and this goes back to just how rare of a breed the hockey players are. He claimed this past season, though, in 2022-2023, in which he did not play at all, that the eye had gotten back to a point where he could play. The eye was no longer preventing him from playing. The only thing preventing him from playing was the hip injury, and he was not able to get back for the Capitals this upcoming season. But he's somebody that, he's kind of fallen on hard times recently. And he's a former Ranger. He was a late-round draft pick, somebody that is definitely a career overachiever. He's won a couple of Stanley Cups. I mean, unfortunately, it was with the Penguins, but what are you going to do? I suppose you can say that was a silver lining of seeing those Penguin teams win 2 in a row, is that Hagelin got a couple of cups for himself. But, again, he's been up against it recently. It's been a tough couple of years for Carl Hagelin. He's someone that I feel like if he comes back, he will immediately become, a front runner for comeback player of the year. And that's almost regardless of whatever kind of, stats that he's putting up. I think just the fact that he worked his way back from the hip injury, and even more seriously, just a scary and just insane eye injury. And, again, he was ready to come back from that as soon as this past season. Obviously, it didn't happen because of the hip issues. But, it's also been kind of quiet on the Hagelin front. I haven't seen anything from him about whether he wants to play or whether he thinks he can play or the doctors are going to clear him to play or anything like that. But again, if you read an article about Hagelin, as recently as this past season, it sounds like he was ready to go as far as the eye injury was concerned. He was ready to put it behind him and get back onto the ice and continue his NHL career. For his career, though, Hagelin, 713 regular season games, 110 goals, 186 assists, 296 points. He's actually played in, get this, 141 Stanley Cup playoff games, which is more than I would have expected for Carl Hagelin. But, he was part of the Ranger team that made it to the finals. And of course, he won the 2 cups with the Penguins. So that's a lot of games right off the bat there. But yeah, in the playoffs, 141 games, 22 goals, 28 assists, 50 points. And again, a 2-time Stanley Cup champion. His last healthy season was 2021-2022, 53 games, only 3 goals, 11 assists. It does sound like, from what I can gather, though, he was one of the Capitals' best penalty killers that season. And as far as the contract is concerned, he's wrapping up a 4-year deal that paid him an average annual value of $2.75 million. He's obviously not going to get that much in terms of the length of the contract or the amount of money per season. Obviously, again, the injuries have a lot to do with that. He had surgery on his eye, which, again, that just sounds horrible. He's been through a lot. And that kind of leads me into why I'm bringing up Hagelin and why I feel like the Rangers should at least look into him a little bit. It's the sentimentality. I'll be honest. I like Carl Hagelin when he was a Ranger. I'll always have a soft spot for any player on the Rangers that was part of that run to the Stanley Cup Finals in 2014. Again, you're talking about somebody who is a career overachiever. He was a late-round draft pick. I don't have his exact status in front of me, but the Rangers got him quite a bit later than they should have been able to. And he's gone on to have, obviously, a very nice career for himself. And he's coming off of obviously some pretty serious stuff here, the hip injury and more, alarmingly, the eye injury, just really scary stuff there. And I wouldn't mind seeing the Rangers give him a little bit of an opportunity. Now, again, there are some red flags. Obviously, the injuries that we've talked about. Also, the fact that Hagelin really only plays left wing, and we know that the Rangers obviously have a surplus of players there. So it'd be hard to know exactly, where to put him or how that would work. Or Carl Hagelin come back and play the right wing. Is that possible? Would Laviolette and the coaching staff, would they be more open and willing to trying some of the left wingers at right wing? We know Brian Hoffman can play some right wing. We've seen Lafreniere do it. We've seen Kreider do it. We've even seen Panarin do it from time to time. So there's always a way to kind of shuffle the deck there, but that is something that also gets in the way. But, again, Hagelin at this point in his career, clearly not a perfect player. And I know there's going to be some people that listen to this and think like, oh man, why do you want him? But, again, you have to fill out this roster with some inexpensive players. And I get the feeling Carl Hagelin, whether he signs with the Rangers or anywhere else, it's probably going to be for 1 year at the league minimum, given everything that he's gone through and given the fact that he's getting up there in terms of age. I mean, I almost feel bad saying that because he's gone through so much, and it almost sounds like, I want the Rangers to take advantage of him and just get him for 1 year, the league minimum. But, that's the cold, hard reality of where we're at with this team. The Rangers have to find inexpensive players making six figures, making the league minimum or just above the league minimum. And I think Carl Hagelin is going to qualify there. You look at what the Rangers did last year. They brought in some inexpensive players. It worked out with guys like Ben Harper and Jimmy Vesey. It did not work out so much for Ryan Carpenter. All those players were making the league minimum last season. And with Carpenter, the way I see it, they took a chance on him last year, 1 year at the league minimum. I'll take my chances on Carl Hagelin 1 year at the league minimum over Ryan Carpenter. Hagelin, he always played hard when he was here. Brought a speed dynamic to the team that they were otherwise maybe lacking a little bit. He can kill some penalties. And again, there is a human side to this. I'd like to see Carl Hagelin continue his career if that's what he wants to do, if doctors are comfortable with him doing it. And you know what? As a 12th forward, I just feel like you could do worse than Carl Hagelin. We'll see what happens there. The human element is there. I'll be completely honest about that. There are some red flags, and I'm sure there's some people that would rather see the Rangers go in a different direction. But I liked Hagelin while he was here, and I'd like to see the Rangers, possibly help him get back on his feet after what's obviously been a tough couple of years for Carl Hagelin here. But anyway, I figure we can pretty much call it there for today. A quick reminder to everybody. I've been mentioning this every so often recently. We're going to do an episode in this off season where it's similar to what we did last year. I had you guys send in your stories about where you were and who you were with when Artemi Panarin scored in overtime in Game 7 against the Penguins. This year, we're going to go back to 2015. Send me your stories of Derek Stepan scoring Game 7 overtime against the Washington Capitals to eliminate them. Spare no detail. I've heard back from a few of you guys already, some pretty cool stories, and looking forward to hearing from a few more of you as well. Also wanted to mention per Pierre LeBrun and Alan Walsh, the Rangers and Yaroslav Halak have had talks about an extension. No details that I can find, at least, as far as, where those talks stand. Are they making progress? Are they close to a new deal? We'll see. But, I'm certainly open to the idea of Yaroslav Halak coming back. I think my top choice for backup goalie would still be Alex Nedeljkovic. But Yaroslav Halak is right up there. He did a nice job for the Rangers this past season. And, if there's any other free agent that you guys want me to talk about around the league, leave it in the comments section, DM me, email me, do whatever you got to do, get in touch with me, and I can definitely make that happen. But that will do it for today, guys. Once again, if you'd like to get in touch with this podcast, please send an email to lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Once again, that is lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Definitely give us a follow on Twitter as well, @LO_NY_Rangers. Once again, that is @LO_NY_Rangers. And definitely subscribe to Locked On New York Rangers YouTube channel. Thanks again, guys. I will see you next time.